Hello, beautiful folks, ERG coaches, leaders, DEI leads. If you're watching this video, you're wanting to know about planning for 2026. It's that time of year when you're looking at the calendar, you're thinking, what do we want to be doing? You're maybe designing your survey, your member survey. This is the video for you. This is the third in a three-part series. So in the first one, I talked about how actually it's really useful for co-chairs to start thinking about their own careers before you go into planning for the ERG. In the second video, I talked about data and measures. And in this final video, talking about the calendar. Beyond events, how do you come up with a calendar of activity that does not lead to burnout, right? So this is ERG Strategy. This is the channel where we share strategies, tools, tips, practical advice, case studies, etc., to give you the tools to maintain engagement within your networks, effective networks that really do deliver and create sustainable change. I'm trying my best to get you a video every Tuesday from 2026. So that's something you can hold me to. I also go live every Friday on LinkedIn at 8:30 a.m. I'm much more consistent on my LinkedIn lives, so you can either catch those on LinkedIn or here actually also on the YouTube channel. So let's get into this. How do you get a plan for 2026 for your network that has maximum impact, but it doesn't lead to burnout? That's what we're going to be talking about. So you know where I'm going to start, right? Our survey said, we ran some data. We've run a couple of reports actually this year because we were kind of trying to find our own cadence in terms of when we want to run our reports. So we ran one like sort of December 2024, January 2025 about what ERGs are doing. Unsurprisingly, the majority of ERGs, it's like events. And for many ERGs, not much else. It's all around events. We ran another survey in Q3 of this year, so in the fall of this year, and we were asking really about impact. And surprise, surprise, again, everybody's saying, we're doing lots and lots of events, but then there are these questions over impact. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that events in and of themselves do not generate a feeling that a network is having impact, right? And this is almost like the pitfall that a lot of networks fall into. There's an over focus and an over emphasis and an over investment on events when events do not necessarily drive impact. I'm not saying that events don't drive impact. It's just that if a network is only doing events, the chances are that both internally in terms of members, but perhaps more importantly, the business and senior leaders looking on that network are maybe thinking that the network isn't having much of an impact beyond kind of like being, maybe a bit of like a social club. So that's the first thing to be aware of. Do not create a calendar that is just overly event heavy. In fact, I did some training earlier this year, and what I liked when we started talking about the calendar, one of the networks piped up and said, we have run 6 in-person events last year and it was too much. And I thought, thank goodness, the message is getting out there, right? I always say focus on one hero event or one flagship event that you're going to have across the year. Now, if you're a network, that works very well, for example, say for women's networks, because, you've got March and you've got International Women's Day. And if you're a men's network, you've got November, which there are lots of things happening in November. If you are a network like, for example, LGBTQ+, or you are an ethnicity network, so a race, ethnicity and cultural heritage network that has lots of different kind of like identities within the network. So you might be thinking, but we can't pick one, because we've got Black History Month and South Asian Heritage Month and, APAC, Asian Pacific Islanders Month. And, there are all these different kinds of months. And then if you're global, it's like Black History Month is in February in the US and it's in October in the UK and how do we pick? So I understand that for some of you that you may think actually there's more than one. I think if you're in that situation, you've really got to think about how you delegate the work down so that you haven't just got the whole committee wrapped up in events for the whole year, right? That is not a productive it's not productive, and neither is it impactful. So you've really got to think about how you do that. You've really got to delegate down if you do need to have more than one hero event, right? So that's the first takeaway. So you don't want too many events. You ideally want one hero event, but if you are a sort of like a joined work, if you're a joined network, then you need to figure out how to delegate these two different groups so that the leadership team isn't only kind of bogged down with events. I'm a really big fan of, and if I've done training with you, you'll know what's coming already. And there was a book on it that I released at the start of 2025. I'm a real fan of looking at the year in quarters. There's a great book called The 12-Week Year, which is actually how I tend to plan. So it's how I plan my business and the work that we're going to be doing. We plan it in quarters. And it's a book that I'd really recommend. So it's called The 12-Week Year. But I want you to look at quarters for 2026. And I want you to have no more than like one main priority for each quarter. It's not to say that you can only be doing one thing at a time, but I think one main priority per quarter. So that means that you're not committing to more than 4 things in 2026, and that includes your one hero event. So in one quarter, you're going to have like the delivery of the one hero event is going to be like that's going to be that quarter's priority. Then you're going to have in another quarter, I want you to earmark a particular policy that you're going to go after in terms of reviewing, is that policy fit for purpose? And then obviously this is also linking to the evidence and the data that you've gathered, right? So you're going to be looking at a policy, you're going to be looking at a process, right? Is there a particular process based on what we've heard from our members, based on what we've seen of the data, based on, other challenges, etc.? Is there a particular process? That's another quarter. And obviously these things aren't necessarily started and finished in the quarter, right? But they just become your main areas of focus. And it just means that you're not starting too many things, right? And then finally, I always like to have one collaboration. And the collaboration could actually be that you're collaborating with somebody else around an event, or it could be that you're collaborating around a policy, or you're collaborating around a process, but it could be a collaboration that has a different spin. I know there's an organization, in fact, there's a couple of organizations that I know that collaborate with external organizations, whether that be charities or in third sector or academia, around pieces of research, and they end up supporting white papers, right? Or they support other initiatives around, for example, young people coming into their industry or their sector, right? Young people in schools or, colleges or universities, etc. So one collaboration. So those are your 4: one event, or your hero event, one policy review, one process, and one collaboration. That's 4. That's plenty. That's plenty. And also, like, as a framework, especially if you are a global network, because I know some of you networks are huge, right? You're like organizations within an organization, right? Because some of you have 60,000 members, right? So I would encourage, if you have regional chapters, right, or country chapters as well, I would encourage your regions and your subdivisions within your network to follow a similar pattern, right? Just keep it to 4. Maximum of 4. It could even be 2 or 3, but a maximum of 4 priorities. And within, I talked about process as being one, but within the process and or the collaboration, it could be something like a development program. It could be a training program that you're working on with the learning and development team, right? It could be that you're working on something in the recruitment process with the resourcing team or the recruitment team or the graduate team or the onboarding team or whatever it be, So, but those are just like 4 broad buckets, and it's 4 things because there are 4 quarters, but it's to make sure that you don't end up overcommitting either yourself as a leader, but also your committee, right? So 4 things as a maximum is what I would suggest in terms of your priorities. That hopefully gives you balance, and also, gets you thinking about how you can best use individuals within the network. Now, I know that for some networks, I know that you tend to structure yourself based on very defined roles. So for example, you tend to have an event person, a comms person, potentially like a finance person or a treasurer person. That's absolutely fine. My only caveat, particularly around your events person, is I don't want that events person to feel like almost like they have to be creating lots and lots of events because that's the title that they have. I'd potentially actually prefer them to have a title which was, International Women's Day 2026. And that's what their role is. Their role is to support that hero event, hopefully supported with some central resource from your comms team, right, which is something else I talk about. But I'm actually more a fan of having roles for the network for a particular year that are more based on the initiatives that are being delivered in that year and where the focus is and the priority, rather than you just have like these set roles where people start to like busy themselves just for the sake of it. Like, I'm not a big fan of that, clearly, because I've seen so many individuals get burned out, and also I've just seen way too many events. There's just too many events happening, and I think some of that is when you create almost like events committees, you know that's what we get. We create events committees, we get lots of events, and they have limited impact often. So my suggestion is, rather than having an events lead, call them a specific thing. Call them the South Asian Heritage Month lead, right? The role description is probably going to be like really similar, but I don't want, let's get away from creating these roles where people feel the pressure to like be doing something every month. Now, let me just clarify here, and this is one thing I said at the summit in Dubai. I'm not saying that you can't have other lower level events, right? And when I say lower level, I mean, maybe you have like a quarterly speed networking where it's for members to get to know each other, or something that I'd actually prefer, it's members with senior leaders, right? That's much more impactful, right? So maybe you have those as like a quarterly event. Great. Delegate it, right? Delegate it as far down in the network as is possible, because actually it's a great way for members to get involved. It's a great way to start to identify champions and potential successors, people that then can start to come and work in the committee, or potentially even be, potentials for future co-chairs, future leaders, future committee members, etc. So if you do have additional events outside of your one hero event, delegate them down so that the whole leadership team isn't just wrapped up in putting on events and discussing, what the catering is going to be and all of those sorts of things, basically. So that's it. I think we've talked about your events. We've talked about your calendar being, sort of like balanced. Let's just really focus on the calendar of priorities being driven by data and measures. So in the previous video, if you haven't watched that, please do go back and watch that. The importance of, especially at the current time where this kind of work is under a lot of scrutiny, you want to make sure that the priorities that you're choosing, right, the events, the policies, the processes, the collaborations, really do link to what the data is telling you the need is, right? The data and the evidence. What are they saying? What is the data telling you would make a big impact? But the other thing I want you to make sure that it's linked to is it's linked to business impact and or a strategic objective. That is your sweet spot. That is absolutely your sweet spot. Linking your collaborations, linking your policy review, your process, and your, in some way, connecting your event to business objectives, business need, the strategic priorities of the organization. If you're struggling to think of those, I mean, there's an activity that I sometimes, I train out when I'm training ERG leads. There's an activity that I talk about that you can do with your team to sort of like narrow down the priorities. And it's you kind of get a 2x2 matrix of easy to do and impact, right? Easy to do, very easy, very hard and very costly. Very easy and cheap, very hard to do, and costly. And the other axis is impact, high impact, low impact. And, once you've done a bit of a brainstorm, this may be something you can do with your leadership team. You do a brainstorm, right, of things, and that's with one eye on the data. So maybe you have a session where somebody presents the data, what the evidence is telling you. You then do this brainstorm, you then plot it into this 2x2 matrix, right? And then the things that come out in the top right as being, high impact and easy to do and low cost, that's what should start to then shape your plans for next year, right? Those are the kinds of things that you should be focusing on delivering, and potentially, shaping your roles around what it is you're delivering as well. Obviously, you do have to be realistic, and that's why I say no more than 4 main priorities for each network. The other thing, it's that the reason that exercise is useful, it helps you to get rid of low impact work. It helps you to get rid of work that is just really too difficult to deliver. Maybe those things are things that you need to push forward into future years. I always sort of say, ERG work it's not an annual thing and then everything is fixed. This is multi-year cultural change that you're trying to have an impact on. So you can't do everything within the next 12 months. Definitely use delegation and utilize those people that are keen to get involved. If you've got a committee actually that currently is very big, but you have a lot of people that are doing nothing, the new year is a great opportunity to actually make some changes in the committee. Change things up, get people on board that are actually going to do some work rather than just coming with ideas but no delivery. In terms of, I talked about the data and evidence being an input. If you're looking for input around business objectives, the strategic objectives of the organization, how you can have more business impact, get your exec sponsor involved in that conversation. This is the link that they should be providing for you. So get them involved in that planning conversation and see how you can, make best use of their expertise in making sure that the priorities that you come up with serve both the needs of the community but also the organization. The other thing that I would say in terms of, how you can make sure that you go into next year without that risk of burnout on you as an ERG leader, we're in a particular time where, many members are feeling under attack, right? Feeling under attack personally or as a result of, as I said, some of the things that are happening out there in the world. So one of the things that it's really important to do as a network is making sure that you have got support structures really well in place and making sure that as a community as a network, you signpost people to where they can get help rather than assuming that the leader and or the committee members have to become the therapist, right? That is generally not sustainable. And also there are risks actually from an organizational standpoint. So really sort of figure out, and this may be something that you can get a group of members to do. Again, it's a nice little piece of work. Get a group of members to come up with signposting for various resources, whether those are internal. If you've got a good employee assistance program, then you may want members signposting other members to your internal EAP and requesting, maybe to speak with a counsellor or a therapist from, diverse or matching lived experiences. Or you may be signposting people to support externally in terms of counsellors and therapists. Use the community as a source of support. You've got tools like Viva Engage, Slack channels, other online channels, etc. Rather than the burden of supporting members falling all on the ERG leader, on you as leader and co-chair or your committee members. So that's the other thing I would say is quite important to put in place in 2026 to make sure that you are not at risk of burnout. So once you've got a shape of what 2026 is going to start to look like, linking back to the first video, this is where I think it's really useful for you then to reflect on your career as a leader. You're supporting your career and your development as a leader. What are you going to get involved in next year, right? You can't do everything, and nor should you be. This is about also giving other people an opportunity to shine, to develop, their skills and their talents to get that visibility with senior leaders. But what are you going to work on as a leader as part of developing your own career? And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video useful. Please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe, share it with your co-chair or your committee members or anybody that's, a budding or potential future co-chair as well. If you think they will find it useful. Thank you again for listening, and I'll see you on Friday morning on the LinkedIn Live. Ciao.